I've taught you everything you know, Nick. I've raised you from a boy into a man, Nick.
If you don't know where pasta is, go down on your girlfriend. That's the message.
Welcome, everyone, to Moral Mayhem. Today, Vaish and I are going to be talking about something very serious, something deep, something that's been on a lot of people's minds across America right now. No, it's not the election. It's the recent Love is Blind DC season finale and the concept of what does it mean for love to be blind, and is the show effectively doing the experiment that they've set out to do?
Yeah, so before we dive into all of that, so what do you, in your opinion, if someone's listening to this and they haven't seen Love is Blind, right? What is essential context that we need to give people?
Okay, so Love It. I actually think you were gonna intro it.
Yes. So let me give. Okay. It's in true Nick fashion. Let me.
Nick.
Finally.
Nick, you're supposed to be introducing the podcast, Nick. Nick, have you watched reality TV before, Nick?
Yeah.
Do you know what a reality show is, Nick?
Yeah.
Because I don't think you know what a reality show is, Nick.
All right. Let me try and explain. Okay. So. So Love is Blind, for those of you who didn't get that joke, is a reality TV show, and the premise of the show is that is the idea that they put contestants, men and women. There are two groups of contestants: the group of men and a group of women, and they're put in these isolated areas, pods. They're put in pods. Well, is pods the place where they talk to each other, or is pods like the general area where they are?
No, they're living in some kind of shared space. Girls with the girls, boys with the boys. It's very heteronormative, and they meet each other behind the pods.
So the pods are basically, it's like, think about a giant room, but with a like opaque divider between them. But they're air gaps such that, or I don't exactly know how it works, or maybe there's a amplifier even.
No, they're wearing mics, I think.
Oh, they're probably mics, yeah. But you basically can't, you can hear each other, but you can't see each other.
Yes.
And
hence the name is Love Blind. So the idea is that they go on dates in the pods and they propose to somebody sight unseen.
Right.
And then drama ensues. They normally go on a vacation or whatever.
But the group of men and the group of women, intrasex, you can see each other. So women see other women, men see other men, and a bunch of why the show is that, part of what generates excitement in the show is the fact that sexual politics is possible given the, men and women, groups of men and groups of women have information on what their friends thought of the same guy they were talking to, and vice versa.
Yes.
So
there's normally at least a couple of love triangles.
Right.
But so the premise of the show, and they call it, an experiment, is that, and I think that this probably doesn't apply to everybody, but like the way I think about it is that the implication is that many people select romantic prospects on the basis of traits which are not actually compatible, or which are not actually predictive of compatibility or relationship success. And many people consider that how somebody looks, just like your first impression of how they look, is one of these things on which it's very tempting to select people, but it doesn't actually lead to, relationship satisfaction. Or that's the experiment that they're trying to test, is how important is that visual impression of somebody. So I think that the way I think about it is like.
So just to be clear, the show should be is, can the initial stages of love be blind? Because these people do end up kind of, so how the show progresses is like once you've once you propose to someone.
No one's getting married sight unseen.
Right, but the thing is, you have to propose to them, and then you meet them if you propose to someone, you're paired off, and then you meet each other in person, and then if you continue and decide to test your engagement, the show follows you, and you go to some location with the other contestants, and at the kind of apotheosis of the show is supposed to be the moment where you are marrying this person you've been engaged to, but the real suspense of the show is will they say yes or no? Will they agree to marry? So really, there's this weird sense of uh, sometimes contestants are talking as if this is a real marriage, um, but or a real wedding. But if you just think about how absurd it would be for someone to just leave you at the altar in front of all your friends and family, the show kind of bakes that into a possibility that you can at least consider, even if they don't encourage that
The
possibility.
show wants at least one couple to not get married at the altar. That's part of the good TV. But yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, to be fair, one thing is that there have been apparently successful marriages out of this show. So it's not like it never works out, but if they get one good marriage per season, that's not bad for people who are
Pretty
looking
good.
to find love. And so there's two themes I want to bring up. One is that, and we've talked about this, that this is sort of like a modern day self-made arranged marriage platform without your family getting to have influence, and we can talk about the the cons or pros of that as well. But I really want to start with, what is the experiment? What does the experiment promise to do?
Yeah.
What is the logic behind it? And then do they succeed at providing that experiment? So the idea is, again, that people select romantic prospects on the basis of traits which are not predictive of compatibility. For some people, they feel that their focus on how somebody looks is one of these things that causes them to like make decisions that are not in their best interest. I don't think that applies to everybody, which we can talk about as well. But I think like for some people, especially people who have really strong ideas of the type that they're into, where like they kind of write anybody who's not that type off. That's just not something I personally relate to, but I do know people like that where it's not something they can figure out how to get rid of. But if they could get forced past that stage, like they've dated people who are not their type if they met as friends first, for example. And so Love is Blind, that I think of the idea of it is like, for people who are like that, we're trying to force you to get to know somebody first, and then you can decide if they're somebody that's not physically
Yeah. So in other
compatible.
words, like we did an episode on adverse
Yes.
selection and dating, and weirdly, Love is Blind. I mean, if you wanted to make up like a smart explanation for why Love is Blind, like the justification for the show, then you would say, well, it's plausible that I'm like filtering out. I mean, if you're speaking as a woman, it's plausible that you're filtering out a bunch of people that you have to filter out because you have to filter out. And like one of the ways you filter in today's modern dating market, given the apps and sort of these legible, scalable mechanisms for selecting mates, is that you make a choice, but that choice is not those metrics. You don't even you could be a person that doesn't overweight looks, but is like forced to select on looks
Yes.
because of the way that the dating market operates, right? But I get the feeling that a lot of contestants on the show, um, like from things they say, it seems as if these are people that have habitually felt like they've been making the wrong choices by being led astray by someone's looks. Now,
Yeah.
I don't actually know how much of this is true versus they just had bad relationships and that was what their takeaway from this was, that I followed my initial attraction. But that's just true of everyone, right? Like if you date someone, you kind of lean into the initial attraction and then you go on. Looks isn't the only thing that uh, blindness can intermediate, which is the other piece of this is how someone looks is giving us information about socioeconomic status and sort of generally what subculture you fit into, which might be or might not be. But I think a lot of those things, frankly, now that I think of it, if you're talking to someone, on the phone, I think it's actually much easier to figure that out by voice than it is even looking at someone, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a huge part of it. So yeah, what else do you think it's shielding? The like not being able to look at someone. I mean, but I guess the biggest thing is
No, that's what
physical.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
I don't think this would help most people. I think there are some people who for whatever reason are really tied up with this narrative that they have that they like a particular type. And that might be because they dated a couple of people like that when they were young. So like anyway, so I think that's the logic for which the experiment could be a sensible way of changing the way you date. The second question is, do they succeed? Yeah, so we can have another discussion about whether that's an important thing to block or not. But I think that they don't even make the case. They just say this is an experiment and we'll see if this like produces a better result. But then the second question is, do they succeed at making blind connections happen? Because I have not watched every single season of the show, but definitely watched the first season. I've watched several of them. And it seems to me that in the first season, the idea that this was this blind experiment was taken extremely seriously. And I either the producers just didn't air it, but there was not a lot of scenes that I remember of people saying, hint, hint, I look like this. I do Pilates every day or whatever. And I feel like it's gone more and more egregious over the seasons of how obvious they are with essentially asking and telling hints about how they look. So last season, as you know, there was the woman who said, I look like Megan Fox.
Yeah, and she did look
And she
like
looks
Megan
a
Fox.
lot like Megan Fox.
She just looks like, I don't even know how to say this without being
Something
mean.
went wrong with Megan. You know, yeah, she's still like all as a regular woman, she's not bad looking, but she's
Yeah.
not a 9 out of 10 Megan Fox.
But she's
Everybody
definitely,
thinks
yeah,
she's
she's
hot.
definitely objectively worse looking than Megan Fox.
Much objectively worse looking than Megan Fox.
In a way where if you say you look like someone, there's
Especially
also
Megan Fox.
There's a subtle message that you are in somewhat the same ballpark, right? But this is just someone like technically having features that the
Yes.
celebrity has, but misrepresenting
Yes.
kind of just the overall vibe.
And we've seen, like, you know, it's not just on the side of people trying to say they look good. Like, on this season, Hannah, who I was imitating before, with Nick,
God bless her.
he basically had said something like, can't wait to see you in a bikini. And she had, you know, she has had variations in her weight, significant variations in her weight. And she had recently lost 50 pounds or whatever. And so she brought up, you know, that made me uncomfortable. I recently lost weight and my weight changes. She didn't, and she was like, I'm not sure you'd be excited by what I look like in a bikini or something along those lines. And so what's interesting is not only that people who feel that, because, you know, the people who come on this show and think they're really hot, the way they talk about it is like, oh, I'm giving up this power that I have and I'm trying to see if other things
but
can
even
work.
that, you could see how it's so easy to send those signals.
Yes.
Now the interesting thing is that it's easy to send those signals, right? So you could falsely, there's no real tax on you in the first part of the show if you send fake signals around how you look
That's not true though, because what I've also noticed
in the first part of the show.
Yeah, but when you watch the show, the season to season, what I've noticed is that people have seen people go out in previous seasons and be a disappointment to the person who had proposed to them, and that is really humiliating on TV. So I think people see that kind of thing and they're like, well, I don't want to be the character that, or they don't want to be the Megan Fox either. Like, they don't want to be I look like Megan Fox.
So
girl.
one of the things that's interesting about reality TV is that there's always, right, no matter what reality TV you're talking about, I think what makes it interesting for me as a viewer is that there's so many layers. You can go meta on this stuff really easily because there's one way to view the show where you ascribe to the participants the motives that the show is producing. That might be surviving on an island. It might be finding a partner in this case. But there's the additional motivation that we should be aware of, which is these are people that self-selected to be on reality TV. And so fame is at least, I don't think it's the motivation. I don't think it's a even partial motivation for some people, but I think for a lot of people, it's at least a partial motivation.
I think it's a partial motivation probably for everybody, but clearly it's not the main, for the people who get actually married, it's like, I hope it wasn't their main motivation to get famous, because then you're truly unhinged. So I'm pretty sure, like, the people who are actually getting married seem like they came in good faith and like.
Yeah, that happened in the show this time, right? With so Nick, who is Nick, Hannah's fiance. So she found a notebook or a journal from his childhood bedroom or something like, or
No,
it
it was written right before the show. It was
from a couple of years. Sorry,
no, his current journal. It's his current diary, which her reading his journal is like a whole other.
And then
thing.
he had 3 like goals of. He said he's a real estate. He's a realtor, and so
he would like to be a realtor.
Yeah, but his goals were really funny because it was sign 2 clients, which is, might I say, he should shoot higher.
He said sell 2 houses this year,
Oh,
which I'm
sell two
like,
houses. Okay.
I don't know what realtors do, but that doesn't seem particularly
Doesn't sound,
ambitious to me.
yeah, doesn't sound very
Unless
ambitious.
these are multi-million-dollar houses.
I don't
Anyway.
think Nick is selling multi-million-dollar houses. But what was the
I
second
can't
one? There was
remember what the
another.
second one was, and then the third one was be the most famous person on Love is Blind or whatever.
Yes.
And basically, you know, Hannah was like, oh, now I understand, you know, why you went so far that you did in the relationship when you clearly weren't actually interested. We'll talk more about that relationship a little bit later
Yeah.
because I think it's like, you know, obviously I'm sure not everybody listening has watched it, so we won't go too much into the specific characters, but that one captured my attention for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, and so
I wanted to ask you one more thing on the blind thing, though. Okay, so I mentioned we already talked about like you can't mask socioeconomic status and blah blah blah. People self-select on that, and they, you know, it's you wouldn't be able to get to know somebody without finding that out anyway. So the idea that you could mask that and get to know somebody doesn't really make sense. So they're mostly just masking how you actually look. But again, people have started giving more and more hints from my perspective. And then this season, they also did this like blanket swapping thing. And they wanted so that the person could see how you smelled. And I was like, is that not part of physical, how somebody look like? So they're kind of now saying, well, to fulfill the experiment, you get to smell them, hear what they sound like, know if you like their voice, all those kinds of things. Just not literally see how they look. You can get a good sense of if they're in shape because they tend to talk about like fitness and other things that give
Yeah.
you a decent sense of how somebody might look.
So the question is, would the show work if like the show was writing letters to each other?
AI voice.
Right.
I am from
Right.
Maryland
Or that.
originally.
But it wouldn't, because we know that, like, well, one, it wouldn't make for interesting reality television, but more importantly, I think like we do think we are losing something, because sort of attraction is a force that's hard to decompose into its constituent parts, but
Right.
you're getting signals from all sorts of senses, and
Like you want to hear somebody's intonation and like
Body
you know,
language.
but so
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
part of the intonation and voice and flirtation, like you can't tell if somebody's being flirtatious or, you know, trying to banter with you unless you can hear the intonation. And so it would be hard to imagine how you can like drop that out. But then this just starts to like, as you think more and more about it, to me, it just starts to unravel the whole idea of the experiment where, well, yeah, you also want to see how somebody moves and all these other things. And if you're not letting yourself have that information, you are potentially not going to like what you find when you come
Yeah.
to see them. And this is not just based on like how high status you think they are or like how attractive you think the average person would think they would look, but just like more idiosyncratic stuff as well.
Yeah, so I don't know that it's actually fulfilling any. I don't actually like. It's a great reality show, right? But I don't know that it actually fulfills its mission because people know that physical attractiveness is important, and everyone's trying to gauge that. And all you end up doing is sort of deferring the decision until later. Like if, especially
Yeah.
with men, if the woman doesn't reach, it doesn't hit their physical attractiveness threshold. Which, by the way, I can tell as a third-party man by looking at the man behave that he's going to be disappointed when he sees her.
Right.
Right.
That being said, most of them are just good looking anyway. So they also don't actually test the boundaries of this. I think partly because they know it wouldn't work, and also partly just because of who wants to be on reality TV. But like most
Yeah.
of those women were attractive, and most of the men were attractive too.
I wouldn't go as far as to say most, but yeah, I think at least it was
They were
definitely
this
not selected.
season. This season was a good looking season, also. So
Yeah, and then so I guess my question is, what are they being? So it is different from arranged marriage to kind of take that comparison in one significant way, which is one, when you're getting an arranged marriage in one of these cultures where your parents or family, there's two components to it. One, these are also cultures where people get married young, so they don't have the decision. I mean,
Right.
they're clearly kids, and so there's some element of just like delegating that decision to people that know better. And of course, the concept of marriage as a more as just not only an expression of sexual and romantic interest, but also a strategic alliance and all of that stuff, right? Love is Blind does it sort of takes all the bad things from there, saying, you can't see each other, and you're, in this experiment where you kind of have to pick one from here. I mean, realistically, you're there to, there's a bias towards making things work, so you kind of have to pick from that pool. But the pool isn't necessarily selected on something that's interesting or useful. Like,
I think that's a great point, because like even if your family might not 100% hold the same desires as you, they are attempting to select your partner from a pool of people who they think like make sense as a long-term partner, whereas obviously the producers of the show are also trying to like get people who are going to be good TV, get a diversity of people, and
but also
so there's like that part
but they
of
are
it.
selected on one thing, which is that
They want to
they
be on
might want to
reality
be
TV.
famous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is not, I would say, adversely selected on that, right?
Okay,
So
except, and I was talking to somebody about this today, if you're the kind of person that wants to be famous, are you more likely to be compatible with another person who's likely to be famous than with a regular person? Probably.
Yeah,
'Cause
maybe.
that might be a very explanatory characteristic that
Yeah.
actually does.
But I
group
also think the
people.
fame thing, if you just think about, I don't know how the economics of new fame works, because, my conception of old school fame is handful of people get to be famous, right? It's sort of like a low probability, high value thing. And I think with social media, there's these gradations of fame, right? You could be an Instagram model, and you'd be influencer with a bunch of, so you kind of have this direct to consumer economy where being being visible is a big step up on reality TV. But still, I mean, I'm going to argue against that, because there's so many of these reality TVs, and there's seasons every year, and there are a bunch of contestants. Just being there is not a ticket to. I don't know what the median earnings are from just the stream, but I just find it hard to believe that there's that much space for so many people to be famous.
Okay, so this brings up another question, which is, what are the incentives that the show encourages? So you're right. Not everyone's going to get famous off the show. There's lots of people that barely even get camera time. And actually, there's couples that get engaged which don't get to go to Mexico and that we never see.
Yes.
But
yeah.
what it incentivizes you to get engaged because you want to stay on the show long enough. And if you don't get engaged, you're definitely not going to stay. So it incentivizes.
It also gives you visibility, though. Like, that's something I forgot, which is just being on the show, and assume you're like you exhibit either you're good looking or you exhibit some like trait that's desirable. Now, just imagine, like, it's like a lot of people don't get to date people because the algorithms don't show them, or they get swiped. Like, this is broadcast into everyone's
you still
face.
need screen time. So I'm saying, once you're on the show, the incentive is how can I get screen time?
Yes.
Which means you have to have emotional conversations. Love triangle is amazing for screen time. If you can get into a love triangle, you'll
Being
get tons
a little
of
bit of a
screen
dick
time.
is a positive, right?
And then but you can't be too much of a dick because you want to get engaged. If you're not going to get engaged, you're also going to get less screen time.
Yeah.
And then you want to be engaged. This season, one of the interesting things was the most kind of like
Leo for a second. Yeah.
No, that's what I'm bringing up.
Yeah.
The most kind of like hateable guy on the show was this guy Leo, who spent a lot of time talking about how he's really worried about women wanting him for his money because he's really rich, and he just wanted to make sure that doesn't happen. And so he made sure that he brought up a lot.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm really rich and I've
He'd be
come
like,
into a lot of money, so
yeah.
I really don't want
And
you
he
to
would say,
take
like,
advantage of me.
I have a real problem with people just picking me for money, so I just want you to know that I'm really rich. I'm like, well, why would you tell people you're rich if you're like, okay, so I kind of liked Leo, right? Despite
Everybody
this,
kind of likes Leo now.
I thought he's a really funny, great guy. But his strategy doesn't make sense if he was being genuine. I don't think he was being genuine.
I don't think he was being
because he
genuine.
ended up with someone who's also quite like.
He literally went with the girl who said,
I want to be a trophy.
I want to be taken care of financially.
Right.
Which honestly, I'm like, fine. She's saying it explicitly.
But maybe that's what he wanted. He wanted this is kind of interesting because it brings us back to something you've written about, which is about transactional relationships, right? And I don't know if you explicitly said this, but people don't like it when you use them as like it's okay for a relationship isn't actually transactional at the relationship level if it's just a series of consensual transactions you've agreed upon. In that it's as transactional as any other relationship, even if it has less depth, right? Like so there's imagine if you
No, it's still transactional. It's just like more ethical, more less likely to be unethical. I think what people worry about with implicit transactional relationships is that one person doesn't
yes.
realize how transactional it is, and that they believe something else is going on. And
Yes, it's
so,
really deception in those cases
right,
and not really the fact that it's
right.
transactional.
I think when I talk about transactional relationships, it's like I think transactional relationships can be perfectly ethical and fine. I just think that people should know that there really are
Right.
deeper relationships available, and like
But
you might
not
be missing out on
but not for
them.
everyone in the sense that like I don't know if there's a 45-year-old man and a 30-year-old woman who are both they're looking for different things in like the people call them trophy wives or you can give it whatever name you want. That's not just because the category is relationship or marriage doesn't mean that that is a terrible transaction. All that means is what we associate with like relationships or marriages. The ideal we aspire to for young people. It's a social construct meant to incentivize certain types of family formation, and that's the ideal. But and we lump a lot of other things into that category because a lot of people can get married. We don't really check why people get married, and they're allowed to get married if they fulfill all the obligations. And so I don't know that I think the problem is conflating that with like the deep relationship you want to cultivate with someone on the same level as loving your children or loving your parents or whatever, right? That thing is not the thing about marrying someone for money, but
I do think there's a reason we have norms against like transactional marriages, though, which is that we don't believe that when it's explicitly or even implicitly transactional in that way that it's as stable, because as soon as
yes,
conditions change, it's
exactly.
not built on something that's as resilient, basically. Obviously, love relationships are not resilient to lots of things too, and people get divorced all the time. And I don't think avoiding divorce is like the most important goal of thinking about relationships either. I
Right.
think like having a good relationship that enables families and all that kind of stuff is more important than simply making sure that the relationship never ends. But I also think that yes, there's nothing unethical about sort of like a semi explicit or very explicit transactional marriage. It's more that like you when I wrote about the transactional relationship stuff, I was also kind of responding to the like red pilled thing that every relationship is transactional. And I'm like, that kind of mentality I actually think is really bad because it puts you into a mindset where you're approaching everyone as a potential transactional partner rather than approaching people being like, oh, is there somebody who I can actually like grow to care about as an extension of myself? And I just think you are going to have a better time, be a better person in relationships, find somebody who treats you better and makes you feel better if you're approaching it in the second
Let me
way.
push back. Not, I don't believe this in some deep way. I haven't thought it through. It's just instinctively what came to mind was, okay, let's say that you're starting a company, right? And you're looking for a co-founder. And, you kind of have attributes that you want in that person. So now that like some of them could be explicitly uh, things that they either possess or don't, right? So like kind of do they have skill X? Do they have complementary skills to me? But the other thing could be virtues, right? Are they conscientious or are they not conscientious or do they like do they have good work ethic, right? Sorry, I said three synonyms for conscientiousness, but it's kind of what I would want a business partner to compliment me.
But
But
yeah, you're also just saying the same thing as you said before too. Like virtues and complementary skills bleed into one
yeah,
another.
bleed into one another. But what I mean is, you really are looking for someone to get you to a goal that you want to get to, and you're using them as a means to an end in a lot of ways. Now, um, but in any good like the fruitful partnerships in the way they differ is not only does this combination work, but I think I would posit that people do care or have to eventually cultivate, true genuine, at least concern and respect for one another in like a business partnership that works, because there are going to be times when you can't just like say you did X, so I'll do Y. The ledger can't be updated that frequently. You have to think much more long term in a collaborative, positive some way. Now, why do you think that's not possible to organically evolve in a romantic partnership? Why does it have to start with this intense metaphysical love?
I mean, it obviously doesn't. Like, people have successful arranged marriages, which do not start on intense metaphysical love. They start on the concept of a transactional relationship, which is we're pairing up to achieve family goals together, and will grow to love each other through action and
Yeah.
through shared goals and responsibilities, which I do think works a lot better than we in the Western context think it does. But those marriages are still within like a structure that is supporting that way of thinking about marriage. It's not like in that structure, the concept that you would just like throw your partner away of
Yes.
something like that's
There
not
are other
in the
things.
spectrum
So
either.
love is sort of like love is a plug variable that substitutes for social pressure. In traditional societies, there are other forces of duty and obligation that keep you in the relationship, because ultimately all this is optimized for the longevity and productivity of the relationship. And
I
you'd
think
argue,
that
yeah,
I think that one thing that we've talked about this probably before is like, to what degree does that intense metaphysical feeling of love predict future compatibility? Like, how strongly related is how you feel in year 1 to how you feel in year 30? Might not be that strongly related. I'm not sure. Because most people feel that kind of intense love before they get married, and it often does not pan out into long-term stable relationships. And plenty of people without it, it does pan into long-term stable relationships. And that brings up, how well does your personal perception of love work relative to your family plus your intuition in a shorter time frame, evaluating people on more explicit characteristics that can be viewed. And then bringing it to this, it's like going back to what you said at the beginning, you're kind of throwing away. I think the arranged marriage concept is that there is a low correlation between how you feel day 1 and how you feel
Yes.
year 30.
Yes.
Second, the things that are highly correlated are things that your parents are better placed to evaluate when you're in your 20s.
Yeah,
at
and things that
least.
you can actually just use metrics to
Right.
evaluate, right?
And also, like, when people do sort of like arranged marriages now, obviously it's more common for the children to be like more involved than maybe in earlier periods.
Right.
Or that idea is like, we as a culture have found other metrics which do correlate with the relationship lasting and being functional. And then, like you said, the issue with Love is Blind potentially is like they're trying to do both of those at once. So everyone in the show, because they're in an American context, for them to feel comfortable getting married, they need to feel that intense metaphysical love.
Right.
Otherwise, they're not going to do it, because
Yes.
that is our culture. And so,
And then they're removing
But
one
they're removing-
component of what kind of facilitates that. And they're not even removing that.
they're not
That's
removing,
the thing.
'cause
They're not even removing
I think
that.
it's more that I think the adverse selection thing actually is a good argument in favor of what the show does.
Yeah.
My question is just, I'm not so sure that they're succeeding in it, because people are giving hints and like they're like pushing it further and further, sharing the blankets and everything, like giving you more and more sort of physical cues of how somebody is.
Yeah, I don't. And the fact, this is maybe a tangential point, but the fact that assertive mating is very much alive and well in the show.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
in
the
this
smart
season,
people go with the smart people.
yeah.
Et
I mean, there's a guy who's a physicist, and
he goes with the chemist woman. Or
yeah,
whatever.
there's just like two upper middle class, yuppie, high income ish couple that you can. I mean, we don't have to label it. You'll know exactly what box they fit into. And there's no one else on the show that would have been a good match for either of them. And I think those type of things are like very easy to figure out by just talking to someone for a
Right.
while, right?
But our contention is that, and we see this in the show, right? Like a lot of the times families are actively against these pairings. And it's like,
Yes.
to meet in a short time and then to trust the metaphysical love, which hasn't had time to burn through the honeymoon phase, not to take into account your family's view of this or their view of like how well you're likely to match on other characteristics, that does seem like a really bad way of going about selecting a partner. Like if the parents were involved, if there was like a more of a community involvement, and there is, like, they come and they bring them to meet their parents, they get their blessing. For many people, they do care about getting their parents' blessing and stuff like that. But there was also one participant on the show who, like, his parents were really upset. And, you know, that couple is still together. They got married and it seems to have worked out. But
I mean, it's like, who wouldn't be upset? Like, you're one, they know that then if they've actually been given the proper disclaimers, then you have to know there's a non-trivial chance that you have to go and get humiliated in front of everyone,
right,
if your son or daughter gets left at the altar, right? That's
right.
one piece of this.
And I think, like, in a world where we now have no fault divorce and love marriages, so like we've had love marriages in the West for a long time, but there was more parental involvement, and love marriages happened young, but there was less ability to get divorced, and there was more community support for the relationship. Of course, that meant a lot of people were in terrible relationships, and I think that's sad. I'm very pro no fault divorce, obviously. But if you have like the no fault divorce, you're doing it on love marriage, what we've done to compensate that in like liberal cultures is you move in with people for like a year before you get married. We have norms around what you're supposed to,
You
what
get them to
kind
meet
of
your
like
friends.
yeah, and you need to like test that love through all these different things, because we all know, even when you're in the like most intense moment of metaphysical love, feeling like falling for somebody, we all know that that is not a reasonable thing alone to make a decision
In fact,
on.
I think what the show often ends up doing is, so I'll admit that actually maybe there's some reasonable probability mass on just the show being at least doing no harm, right? And that's probably likely. But in some cases, I feel like what the show does is actually manufacture or put pressure to somewhat manufacture the feeling of love.
Yes.
Which people like to think of it as these separate categories, but you know, it's totally. I think my view of this is, I'm sure they actually feel love in the moment, even if the forces that the show, basically the way that the show is designed, the pressure, the incentive you have to go make it to the next round, all of this is making you slightly more likely to fall in love,
well,
right?
also, like
this,
the people who come on this show are people who, for whatever reason, really want to get married soon.
right.
And haven't been able to. So they're
Yeah.
also just like excited about the prospect of, a lot of them, you know, are more normie people, or else it wouldn't work on the show. And like, that's also from our kind of like social group dating norms. Like, we don't have any friends who could just go meet one of 10 people and that would be their spouse.
But this is why I found that couple that paired up, the physicist and the woman he was with. I forget what she does for a living, but those two people, I'm really surprised that they went on the show. Like,
I know.
There was
And
a
then
reasonable chance that they wouldn't meet anyone, right?
They're both good looking too, which is
Yeah, right.
bizarre.
And so, I think that would be my worry if I went on. Imagine I went on the
Pulling up
show.
the cast just so that we can.
Yeah, imagine I went on the show. I would be worried about who is this other person like me? What made them go on the show? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Garrett, that was
Garrett,
him.
that's his name, yeah.
Occupation, quantum physicist.
I think he just studied quantum physics. He's not like a quantum physicist. He's not like sitting in a laboratory trying to make things happen.
And he
Anyway.
loves fishing. Okay, but somebody like Garrett, actually, I think you can interpret this by, he loves to fish, so he's doing male-only hobbies, and then he's in quantum physicist, male-only profession.
Yeah, I think he's pretty
and
trad
he's probably
actually
just
as a
not very
person.
interested in dating. Like, he probably doesn't find dating very fun, so he doesn't like spending time on it. And he's just like, I just want a smart enough, nice enough lady to marry.
Yeah.
Which is the arranged marriage thing. It's just, again, like, no normal American can admit that they want an arranged marriage.
What I want is the first kind of someone to go on Love is Blind, very earnestly talk really seriously about love, and then just say, I want an open relationship, though. I don't know if I mentioned, but what I want is
I
an
know.
open relationship.
I feel like the show, you know, they have some scruples because there's a lot of things that they could have done to raise ratings that they haven't yet. Having poly people on, having bisexual women on who might fall in love outside of the pod.
Showing people literally fuck, which they did
Okay,
do.
that-
Sorry. So
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about that.
But no,
'Cause I
finish
think
your
that,
point. Finish your point.
that's all my point is just like they have some scruples. They also didn't send the relationship we were talking about before of the wealthy guy and the gold digger. They didn't send them to Mexico. They took them off the show, and the producer said it's because they knew that they wouldn't work out. So like I'm like really you have this kind of like ethical scruples, but also they haven't done they've done a lot of, obviously they have characters on, but they still want at least some marriages to come out of it. Otherwise the show loses credibility too.
Yeah, and like it loses because it's sort of it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because what will maximize your eyeballs this season is not what will maximize eyeballs over time, because you want also you want a more interesting mix of people next time.
Yes.
And
they want
so
to
on.
bring back people from they want people who are like worthwhile to apply.
Right.
They want to be able to like bring them back and look back on other seasons.
And like think about I think there is something like the fact that there are people on the show who are somewhat relatable in the sense that they're not totally outside someone I would meet at a party. That makes people more engaged and like plugged into the show, right?
I loved I just would say I liked the DC season better than a lot of other seasons because the women in particular were much more like women that I would socialize with. Not exactly like women I would socialize with, but like they looked normal. Like on some of the seasons, I actually have a hard time looking at the aesthetic of the extreme surgery stuff. Like it's just so ugly to me that I am turned off of watching the show. And like every woman was just relatively attractive this season and normal looking.
Glad all these women didn't turn you off, Reg.
It's not even that the women on the other episodes are unattractive. Like they're clearly very attractive to the type of guy that they're trying to attract. It's off-putting for me to watch. And like obviously people in DC are just so anti, like
one of the things
even reality TV show wannabes in DC are not the same as like.
Let me give people one reason not to watch it. This is, I don't know how many times you've been around when, because I think you were in somewhere else. I wanted to call your attention to it the last time we were watching it. There's always a couple of times in the pods where people are trying to talk to each other and then they get horny. And, you know, sometimes you can see the guy just kind of like lying down on the couch and he's kind of like, he has like a half chub on. And then he's just like, yeah. And it's just the most cringe thing you can ever watch on television.
Which brings us to, okay, I want you to talk about the privacy thing and then we'll be done the meta conversation and we'll talk a little bit about our favorite couples. But this is kind of related to this where it's like, we're cringing. I don't even want to see some of the moments like this.
Yeah, so when they're in Mexico, when the couples meet, they will often, like at least for an episode, when they're first meeting and the couples are exploring their conjugal life, the camera is relentless because the camera is everywhere, right? So they're
right up.
They're wired the whole way.
We've got a close image of them laying in bed, like talking.
Yeah, and then like they're literally like kind of trying to the first time I watched that I was like, oh, it's a show, they're just trying to be cute. But no, these people are like doing everything within the rules of the game to not be photographed in their most intimate moments. But the show is just so actually quite hilariously unself-conscious that it just goes ahead and gets people. I'm surprised they didn't show anyone grunting. They've showed like the mounting is apparent from the sheet. Right?
No, but like they don't go as far as Big Brother, because I remember Big Brother and like Summer House, they'll take the audio. They won't show any nudity, but they'll show like figures moving under the covers.
The kissing, the sound of the kissing.
They'll keep the sound of the kissing. They'll play that. Whereas in this, they only give you a teaser, but it's like clearly the people are trying to hide from the cameras. And Vaishya and I were just like, I'm fine with watching the show, and just because they talk about that they had sex and you can get a sense of whether they enjoyed it or not. Like we don't need to actually watch them.
Oh yeah, and then they all
trying
talk about,
to start
for like
having
a week
sex.
they only talk about like
who's having sex.
You guys fucking we're
last thing about the sex thing is like the issue is that some people do choose to be more conservative, and to be fair, like this is somebody you might have an emotional connection with, but I think it's totally normal to not want to have sex the first time you meet someone physically.
And usually it's a woman, but
normally
let me introduce the case of
but this is not on this season.
This is on Love is Blind UK.
Yeah, Love is Blind UK.
there's a guy who is
Seems
refusing to have
shallow.
sex.
Yeah.
But it's very clear that it's because he was disappointed in the reveal.
Yes.
And he's they're having deep conversations. He's bonding with her, and he has this alibi for why he doesn't want to do it, which is some bullshit about how it ruins every deep connection by
But he's just so
making
the
it
guy
physical.
that you know for 100% sure.
Yeah, because another hot woman walked in and he was like, "She looked good, man."
No,
he
but
couldn't stop talking about it. It
Also,
was-
okay, yeah. Actually, that brings up one more theme, which is like the potential for regret. So,
yeah,
as we mentioned, the show is they get engaged in the pods. There's normally at least one or two love triangles. And so some people have had connections with other people that they gave up and ended up getting engaged, or they dated somebody early on and didn't work out.
Yeah.
And then they take them all on vacation together where they all meet each other and they get to see, like, in this case, he turned down the most attractive woman on the show. And so he then gets to see
it's like
that
Jim,
he turned
meet
her down.
counterfactual Carrie,
Right.
the one you could have been with.
Exactly.
You know?
So
yeah.
anyway, okay. Should we talk a little bit about the actual couples? Because I have a couple of themes to
Yeah.
touch on. But if you
Yeah,
have
let's do
anything
it.
more on like the meta show, we can do that first.
No, let's do it.
Okay. So I definitely want to talk about Hannah and Nick, but I think maybe first we can talk about Ramses and what was her name?
The military woman.
Yes.
I forget her name. What's her name?
Ramses and Marissa.
Marissa. Yes.
Okay. So Marissa
Let's do it for quick
quick bio.
quick bio. These are actually, I will say, these are two people that are quite hard to box. Like whatever your
Yes,
model
that's
of
true.
your socioeconomic, racial, cultural, it's just not what you'd expect.
Marissa is from a lower class background, single mom family that,
Right.
you know, she has multiple siblings and, you know, her mom is she's very close with her mom. Her mom is, you know, somebody that she needs a lot of her respect from, etc. But she had a rougher, tougher
Her mom's also a
upbringing.
total asshole. Just by the way, yeah, and
But not to her.
Yeah.
Her mom seems like she's there. Her mom seems like a total asshole to everyone except her kids, who she gives very mama bear, I will destroy the world for my children
Yeah, that's
energy.
right. Yeah.
So, but Marissa, you know, grew up in a lower middle class background. She went into the Navy at a young age. It gave her a lot of
the Navy or the military.
The Navy.
Okay.
She was in the Navy. So, I mean, the Navy's part of the military.
I know. Thanks.
He doesn't understand. Sorry, I try to teach him about military
Because
history,
Indians,
geopol,
they don't know anything
and all
about
that
military.
kind of stuff.
Go on. Yeah.
So anyway, Marissa, as I'm saying, I'm just giving the context of like why the Navy was important.
Yeah,
to
no,
her,
it's super important.
Which is
Yeah.
that she probably wouldn't have had certain opportunities which she did get because of that. Like it brought her all around the world. It like gave
Yeah.
her this stuff on her resume, and now she's in law school to become
Yeah.
a lawyer. And so obviously her mother is like extremely proud of her and thinks she's
Yeah.
crushing it. And Ramses is Mormon
Soft
background,
boy.
I believe.
He's very soft boy. Is the first. That's the first thing that I want to say. He is not like. Look up soft boy on Urban Dictionary. BOI, by the way, not BOI.
You're so up with the kids, babe.
So soft boy is a particular type. It's got nothing to do with being. In fact, the whole point of a soft boy is that the soft is an appearance, or the nice guy is worn as a cloak to satisfy your ultimately Chad desires. And this guy is, I think, he certainly fits that profile, but he's not like. He's just a weird. I mean, look, I thought he was gay,
but we
right?
need to give more background on him.
Yeah.
Ramses, importantly, this is also very important to. There's important things to both their stories for how they ended up how they are right now.
Yeah, sure.
So Ramses I grew up Mormon, I believe, or religious at least. He got married young. He got divorced young because he moved away from the faith, and she didn't. And now he's like countercultural, experimenting with all this stuff, and trying not to look conventionally masculine, even though he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah, he's a good-looking guy. He's he actually isn't effeminate in the way he talks or anything like that.
No, he's not. That's why I'm saying like it's
yeah.
clearly like a rebellion against. He moved out of his faith. He's trying to like move away from conformity and conservatism in general, I think. And Marissa also is in that place. So this is important where she dated mostly military guys up
And
until now. And
one can
she,
surmise she had bad experiences with that because she
yes.
says many things to that effect, but primarily the fact that, well, they were all very different. Those guys were all very different from Ramses, but like,
Right.
I was done with that. And then one really wonders if, like, with her, I couldn't tell. Like, I couldn't tell if she was really done with that or not.
I
But
just felt like it was like a expression of rebellion against, yeah, it hadn't worked out for her. And she, I think politically has shifted too, where she is a little more, has more complex feelings about
the military.
the military. So, like I was saying when we were watching it, like, I think it's totally consistent to be proud of your time in the military, to think it's very important that people join the military and follow orders regardless of what they are. And then also you can have that position and then also say, I think we've made foreign policy mistakes. And it's unfortunate that when I served, I'm not happy with some of the things I served on. But it's still critical that a military exists and will follow whatever foreign policy dictates them to do. And I'm proud of having served a role in the system, which I think is important, even if you disagreed with specific decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that it's quite interesting to me that, like, would teachers, so I think we're doing a pretty fucking poor job of education, right? And would a teacher feel obliged to defend every educational choice or policy?
Anyway, the reason we're talking about all of this, which we forgot to say, is that
Yeah.
one of the very interesting dynamics between this couple was that he was extremely judgmental of her military service. And he basically framed it as like, you need to regret it and never consider doing it ever again, where she had been open to like being in the reserves. And I think, again, because she was in this place where she felt disappointed from these military guys, or she'd had bad experiences or whatever, and she was trying to like rebel, she wasn't even seeing that as negatively as, it. I don't think, I can't imagine how you can be okay with somebody thinking the way you spent 10 years of your life, which was an incredibly formative and important experience to you, was evil, basically. Like that. And her friends were just like shocked by this opinion because they're all Navy women.
I mean,
as
also
well.
he is a very so I really dislike this Ramses guy.
Yes.
If anyone watches
yeah,
it,
everybody hates Ramses. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, really? Is that the internet? Is that what the internet's saying?
I don't know what the internet's saying, but I'm like, there's not much about him to like.
He's quite. I mean, he's very unapologetically superficial in a sense that there was this dynamic between them where it was clear that he wanted to be a lot more touchy and sexual than her, and they had this thing. But it was just the soft boy language that he put around
Yes.
the primacy of his desires that was so weird and repulsive.
He's very much the guy who knows how to therapy talk his selfish positions into an acceptable request or something.
Yeah.
Even with the sex stuff, which I think is very interesting too.
And even with the military, he was like, oh, yeah, there's just some principles. I'm like, what principles? I mean, it's just so vacuous. I mean, the fact that people are having, like, I just thought that was so disqualifying. If someone says, I have a problem with you having served a public function without which you can't even have a country. Like, it's just so bizarre.
Yeah, but he's like, his political beliefs probably are that we should have no military, right?
But that's a really fringe. I want people to admit that just because this is like common in a very specific section of the urban American populace, this is a fringe view that most people find really stupid.
Yeah. Anyway, the other interesting dynamic that came up with this couple was around birth control. So basically, she doesn't take birth control. She doesn't want to because she thinks the hormones are bad for her. And he was like, well, I don't want to use condoms forever because I don't like using condoms. And having good sex is important to me. So, like, if this is going to be a long-term thing that you're not open to at all, I just think we should talk about how that's going to work. And she was like, that's fine. Don't use condoms. And if we accidentally get pregnant, we'll keep the baby. And he was like, no, not okay with that either. I'm definitely not ready to have a baby. So
I want to nut in you. I want a raw dog and nut and not have a baby.
Yes.
That was
yes.
his position.
Which, to be fair,
and no military service.
and no
Four
military
things.
service. But to be fair,
Yeah.
the sex thing, okay, as much as he was the villain in that moment, and generally people, I think it's a good norm for men to think, hey, I shouldn't tell a woman what to put in her body. However, I also think that it's reasonable to be like, I don't want accidental pregnancies. Like,
Um,
I think a lot of men would not be cool with dating a woman who
yeah,
is
I
going to
think
keep a baby if she has an accidental pregnancy and, not
maybe
take birth
this
control.
is in the general domain of things that are quite a bit harder to work out because of the structure of the show, because like it does feel bad, it does feel wrong to try to impose this sort of condition on
Yes.
someone, but it's not actually, it's a discussion that should happen organically, and is which is not awkward or wrong if you've known each other for the right amount of time, and if, in an organic setting this is not a problem, but it just looks
Also,
bad on TV, which I think I have some sympathy for him for that, because I think it just made him look much worse than it.
yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
also we have to keep in mind that, like, I know plenty of women who would not be comfortable taking birth control and would be furious if their boyfriend tried to imply that they should for his sake. But these are also the women that I know who have that opinion would also get an abortion. So that is also like these people are both from like more conservative backgrounds with respect to that and don't want to get abortion. Like I don't think he would be comfortable with abortion either necessarily. I'm not sure. But my point is like the women I know who have those kind of rules around birth control are happy to get not happy, are would plan to get an abortion if they had an unexpected pregnancy. And so if you're not okay with getting an abortion with an unexpected pregnancy and you're not going to take birth control, yes, then the only solution is condom sex, basically,
Condom sex it is.
unless you're
Yeah.
okay with the accidental pregnancy. But I also think it's fine for someone to say, I don't want to have condom sex for 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's so crazy. So, anyway,
Right.
I still think he's the villain,
Yeah, I mean, I
but
don't know.
I'm
I
just
did. I
saying.
actually, okay, just to play devil's advocate, there's a sense in which actually in the context, I don't like him as a person at all, and I find his, most of that's like my political instincts when he talks about some of these things, and he fits an archetype of person that could be quite toxic, but that's just a hunch. But in the context of the show, actually, I think he conducted himself with more integrity than most people did, because he was quite honest about deal breakers and was more communicative about
That's true.
kind of whether stuff was working for him or not.
And thank God he left her before
And he
they
left
did the
her
wedding.
before they got to the altar. So
Although I
all
would have
those are
loved
positives.
that.
What?
The producers were probably pissed about that.
Which shows he has integrity in some way, right?
Right.
So
I
uh,
think it was crazy that she wanted to marry him, given all of the incompatibilities that arose post pod. And that honestly shows that something's probably pretty off with her, which I already had a feeling there was, given that she's very attractive. She has a personality that tons of guys would eat up. Like, her personality would be catnip to men in the sense that military chick,
I think that is what that is.
pretty,
Yeah.
like, funny. Like, she's high energy, fun, bubbly woman. It's
But apparently too much so. So because
Right.
she was
That
like
was
quite
weird.
cognizant of the fact that her energy puts people off, and she was quite triggered by the fact that he also invoked that justification for not being with her. But it seemed to have like some grounding in there being some. I don't even know if it's energy so much as she's. I think just neuroatypical in a bunch of ways, and that's always interesting. Is like, why would you go on the show if you're new? I mean,
I
like
totally
you have to
agree,
be quite
yeah.
normie to get the most out of this type of experience. You have more selection power than, right?
But that's
And
what I don't understand about her is like she, like I said, like she seems like a dream girl for some subset of men where I'm like, why don't you just date that subset of men? Because I guess she's had bad experiences there and who knows why.
and she was actively seeking. We didn't get to see the whole of this unfold, but it seemed like she was actively seeking the oppositional archetype to whatever she had
Yes,
dated before,
100%.
and Ramses fit that mold quite well. And that sort
Perfectly.
of.
I actually felt like there were some scenes where the way she was reacting to him felt very objectifying. Or maybe not objectifying. Yeah, basically. Like not objectifying in the visual sense, but
like reference or like referring.
how well
to
he's
him.
filling this like archetype, like you were saying, like
Yes.
she wanted the opposite archetype, and then there was moments where he was speaking in a way which was just like perfectly fulfilling the archetype
It was,
therapy
it was
speak, blah, blah.
like he did this unsolicited
Yeah.
vulnerability thing
Yes.
when they asked him a question and he dove right into his feelings.
Her friends or whatever.
Yeah.
And then she was
And
like,
then she
oh my
just
God,
looked at
look how amazing
she just looked at him going like, see what
Yeah.
I found
Yeah.
here.
And it didn't
which is
feel
interesting.
like
Do you ever look
true-
at me like that, saying see what I found here with your friends? Well, when I first met Reagan's friends, I said retard within 20 seconds, and then they didn't
No,
like me so much.
Not that you said it's that you said it 4 times. I
But
was
there
like,
must have been a good reason if I said
I
retarded
was
4
like,
times.
I was like, I think he's just like, I felt like you were like,
I was trying to show my personality.
by the
I
way,
was
guys,
nervous.
I'm the kind of guy that freely uses the R word.
I think. Look, okay, never mind.
Okay.
Move on.
I think the couple I would choose to talk about last, because we probably have to wrap up soon, is Hannah and Nick. So, okay,
So,
Hannah is probably the most hated character on this season.
oh, is that right?
Yes.
Interesting.
She has been
I don't
torn
think she's
apart
that hate,
online.
buddy.
I agree with you. So, do you want to just like give a summary of the dynamic, or I can if you don't want to?
Yeah, so fill it in because I will probably do a poor job. Nick had the upper hand in the pods. Nick was choosing between 2 people and ended up choosing Hannah over presumably slightly hotter girl, right? Was there something where he was like
No.
choosing between?
Was he? No, she was choosing between 2. Remember, she was dating the rich guy.
Oh yeah, she was choosing
He
between the
just
rich
had a
guy. Yeah,
date
that's
with
true.
somebody.
That's
Yeah,
true.
that part-
She was choosing between Leo, the rich guy who we mentioned, and Nick, and she ended up choosing Nick. And it was, you could tell she was like, there was some friction in the decision making where she knew the rich guy was kind of a rich guy, a little bit transactional, was like playing her
Yes.
against this other woman, but Nick, she knew Nick was like not really the most accomplished man around. So that was, I think, part of the confusion in her decision making calculus early on, but then she
Right.
sort of, just stuck with it because the show forces you to stick with it. And then when they met each other and started spending time together, it was, I mean, I don't know, like, Nick is like kind of what I was when I was 20, maybe, but
But he's
except I was
28.
living away and he was living with his parents.
But he's 28.
But he's 28 and he is still living with his folks.
Okay, Nick. So Hannah is really mean to Nick throughout the entire season, which is what the joke was like. He comes into the room. She's just critical. She acts like he doesn't know how to do anything. She tells him at one point, I've taught you everything you know, Nick. I've raised you from a boy into a man, Nick. And it's like, dude, you've known this guy for 5 days. But also, Nick was truly, shockingly
So
incompetent.
one place where I related to Nick was when Hannah asked him to get the pasta because she was cooking.
my God.
And he went to the fridge. And I was like, that's funny because there's a time not too far in the past where I would have not gone to the fridge. That's a bit of an over,
Babe,
but
at
really,
28, at 28, what that tells it that a man doesn't even know where pasta. Okay, the scene is this: they're making dinner. She's making dinner. He gets home. She is unemployed, so to be fair, she should have just made dinner anyway and not asked for help. Frankly, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion on like if somebody's unemployed and they're already making dinner, I would just make dinner if somebody got home from work. Anyway, she's making dinner. He offers to help out. She says, "Sure, Nick, do you want to boil the pasta?" And he's like, "Yeah, where's the pasta? I don't see the pasta." And she's like, "Yeah, Nick, the pasta's not out yet. You got to get it out." Then he goes and stands in front of the fridge and he's like, "Weird, huh? I thought you might have I don't see pasta in here." And she's like, "Yeah, Nick, that's because the pasta's in the cabinets." Finds the pasta. Then he gets the fucking pot out and he asks, "How much water should I put in the pot?"
this is a question I've asked you though, to be fair. You said it doesn't matter,
Yes.
right?
Well, she was like, "Just filled up," and he's like, "Halfway, 3/4." He asked her to decide between halfway and 3/4.
Can I mount a
Then he asked her how hot to put the oven to boil the water. She's like, "Heat to a boil, Nick. Do you know how to heat to a boil?"
Okay, look,
It's bad. It's a really bad.
I have 3 words for you. Division of labor. Not, I don't mean that in the
Yeah,
sexist
except
way.
he's poor.
No, 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 exactly.
And she lives in
I
a
mean,
sick apartment.
he's so busy building real estate skills. We should not try to be all generalists. We have,
That's
you know,
true. That's
Adam
true.
Smith, remember? Remember?
Okay, the reason that this is so egregious, though, is he told her in the pods, I love to cook.
Oh, did he?
He told her I love
Oh,
to
that's
cook.
bad.
Okay. So he really did misrepresent himself. So anyway, my point is she's rude to him. I would be embarrassed for those moments to be on TV if I were her, and I think she is. She clearly, from something one of her friends said on the show, has an issue with being too direct, too kind of bitchy, for lack of
Yeah.
a better word. And she
Remember
should
her
work on
gay
that.
friend was like,
Yeah, exactly.
he came over and he sided with Nick as soon as she went to the bathroom.
Yes. Which is pretty
because
bad.
apparently it was presumably she'd been a total bitch to him too.
Yes.
Um,
So all of that I see, but what I found so surprising about her being like hated online was I thought a lot of women would actually relate to what was going on here, which is like she's with someone who is actually truly incompetent, like a child who has been taken care of by his mother. And like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of women have had this moment. I would have thought a lot of women would relate to the feeling of, I hate how I'm talking. I hate that I'm becoming this way. But this like feeling of what happens when somebody is constantly incompetent, constantly underperforming, and the
Yeah.
mounting irritation, and like you can come to hate how you're acting. But I also think I totally understood like that
So the
scene
show-
in the with the pasta.
So the show is, only gives you partial access to what's happening. But so let's just I'll just talk in the abstract. I agree with you that that's a huge minus, right? He needs to acknowledge, and I think to a large extent he acknowledges the huge negative that is. Just leaving aside the fact that he's unemployed, like not doing well in his career and stuff like that.
Acknowledging it would be not even going on the show because you need to like
Right.
know
You need
how
to fucking fix it,
live
right? Like
before you can have a
That's right.
wife.
But then, assuming Hannah is seeing this as a project that she can reasonably invest in, I think like maybe she was doing this, but the way that you would realistically do this is, yeah, you can't have just one big session and you can't say this to him all the time every day. You have to have like, okay, here's what we're focusing on this week, like, or
Yes.
set some reasonable targets, help him, encourage him, and enforce rules too. But and she has to kind of parent him, and you have to be sure that you're not going to get all dry after
No,
the
and
end of that
the
process.
other problem is that
Yeah.
she is like her house was so clean. It was crazy. She was like wiping the cabinets every day. But that being said, Nick did give
And
her
he
the
didn't go
ick.
down on her. I think that's the other part.
Yeah, that okay. Actually, let's touch on that. In
If
a
you
little
don't know
bit.
where pasta is, go down on your girlfriend. That's the message I have.
think
if you don't know
that
where the
is-
pasta is, eat her
Come
out to
on.
completion.
This is a great message. Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna be incompetent and all that, but like, I think that is the sad thing is he's so like he actually didn't. The way she was talking about the sexual issue was like he doesn't know what
Vagina is?
like.
Was he looking in the fridge?
I think the only kind of sex he's had is probably like short-term relationships or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because she said he just had no concept of foreplay at all. Like that didn't even occur to him really.
Oh, she was telling the girls this?
Yes,
Like,
and to be fair, telling it at all was mean in the sense that you're being recorded and people are going to see it. But she was being very generous in the way she was talking about it to the other girls. She was like, I'm excited to like explore with him and like I'm being more open and explaining, because this is different from my previous relationships where there was a more direct communication and like all of that said, if he wanted her to help him get better and stuff, he shouldn't have said he knew how to cook, loved cooking, blah blah blah. Shouldn't have said he's crushing it as a real estate agent when he doesn't sound like he sold any houses.
also shouldn't have flirted
And
with the other girl.
shouldn't have given her the ick by riding that duck.
By what?
Riding that duck. Remember when he rode the
Oh,
duck?
yes.
The relationship ended that moment. And they should have just broken up then. But again, this goes back to you're incentivized to try to stay on the show.
Yes.
So I also think she was getting bitchier and bitchier
Because she wanted to
she
stay on the
wanted
show.
to stay on the show.
Yeah.
And same with him. He was dealing with her being so mean to him, even though they're a terrible match as it became more and more obvious. And he's not ready for a serious relationship, frankly.
But
But
he's
they both
not-
want to stay on the show.
I think the thing with him is I initially thought he was a guy who was a lazy guy with potential. But I think a bunch of ways in which he conducted himself made me realize he's actually just a dumb guy.
I think he's an idiot.
Dumb and lazy guy, which is really, again, if you're dumb, you shouldn't be lazy. If you don't know what the past is, go down on your girlfriend, right?
And
It's two
also,
rules.
bringing back the Megan Fox thing, he told her he looked like Henry Cavill, the hottest guy
Who,
in
Nick?
Hollywood. Nick said he looked like Henry Cavill,
Oh,
Cavill or whatever.
well,
Wait, I'm just gonna see if I'm confirming this. Nick looks less like Henry Cavill than Chelsea does like Megan Fox, but it barely got brought up at all. Interesting. That is actually interesting. Why weren't people making fun of him for saying he looked like
so
Henry
remember
Cavill?
she was
That's
kind of
crazy.
she was kind of upset with his physical appearance because he said that he was like a jock or like a
Yes.
football player or
and that
something.
he looks like Henry Cavill, who's also huge, a big guy. Like,
Yeah, and like but like, by the way, Nick has.
Good
She was kind of
body.
upset with his body, but he had a great body and he was fine actually. That was the only
Yes.
dimension along which he was actually well above average.
Yes, he just shouldn't have said he looked like Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
But I actually did. My initial thing was to defend him, and I defended the Megan Fox woman too, frankly, because I think that people were.
But people should just not talk
Just
about. I
don't
think there
say
should
you
be
look
a
like, yeah.
stronger norm against directly talking about looks. Because come on, guys, it's the fucking premise of the show. And I think there should be a stronger norm against like lying or misrepresentation of any type because of how the show is structured,
Yes.
such that you should just treat like any misrepresentation or lie as a total
As a
disqualifier.
red flag, yeah.
Which brings us to the extremely. I don't know if you had this on your list, but I do want to talk about it. Is the sperm donor guy. So
That's still confused, by the way.
yeah, so this woman discovers like that the guy that she's dating or engaged to has two babies.
I think two.
And initially you would like from the strength of her reaction, one would infer that he just has, kids with his ex-girlfriend, never told her. But he has, by all accounts, sperm donor babies that he donated to a lesbian couple, right? Is this correct?
So I am not up on the gossip, but basically, Gayatri told me that the woman who he was apparently the sperm donor to came out and was like, no, those are his kids, and he knows them and he has been involved. And
And then he clarified that actually the situation had changed, and the one of the partners of the homosexual partnership had left the other one high and dry.
Right.
And
then
he
got
filled in.
involved.
He filled in and got involved in parenting his child, which kind of throws light on a question that might be lingering beneath the surface, which is is this just someone who he had a sexual relationship with in the past?
Right.
And the other stuff is like a cover up, but like who knows, right? What is the truth finding mechanism for shows like these? Like, does Reddit just come up with kind of what's going on, or what happens?
I mean, a lot of it is that. Oh yeah, sorry. I just saw this in an article. One of the things was she was like, "Do you even know what these kids look like?" She was trying to gauge the strength of the relationship, and he said, I don't think so." Which is already, somebody's lying if they say, "I don't think I know what they look like." 'Cause
Oh, and
it's
this
a
was
yes
the
or
same
no
guy
answer.
who said, actually, so it's funny, this guy showed no red flags.
The mother of Francis's 3 children denied the account manager's take, which is Tyler. In a series of 5 videos, Bree Thomas, the mother of Francis's children, shared her side of the story. "I do not like all my business in the world for everyone to see, but this is just the situation we're in. I feel it's important for me to let everybody know. She had a close friendship with him. He offered to help her and her ex-wife conceive. After the split, he helped raise the baby boy, and the 2 additional children, who were twins, were conceived via natural, unplanned intercourse with absolutely no complexities surrounding parentage."
So they have 3 kids.
Yes.
Wow. So remember, there was like only one red flag with this guy, and it was very early on, where he said, "Don't believe things that people might say on the outside."
I
Do you remember this?
forgot that.
Yeah, like
Oh my
he had this whole
God.
thing about how how everyone has skeletons in their closet.
she was
correct?
like,
She
"I
was like,
don't."
"I don't fucking have
Wait, was that him or was that the one who did end up cheating? Was that Tyler or was that...
No. It was
Tyler?
No, it was this one. It was the sperm donor one.
Really?
Who's Tyler?
Tyler. Is it Tyler's the sperm donor one?
Yeah, no, it was him. Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Um, but the new person or whatever, the woman he found seems cool with it, right? Like we watched the reunion and um,
But anyway, I think that the point you're making is like, yeah, given how little time you have to make a decision about marriage, you should throw people out much more, at least out of them getting married in 3 weeks type of thing,
yeah.
over small infractions like this. And it's pretty interesting that she didn't. And they are still married, so we'll have to track them and
We'll
see how it
track
goes.
them, guys. We'll track them.
In case people were wondering, we didn't tell. Ashley and Nick did not get married.
Oh, really? You mean Hannah and Nick?
Hannah and Nick, shit.
Yeah.
Hannah and Nick did not make it. Shocking, I know, but yeah, I think like generally my overall interpretation or my overall conclusion after watching multiple seasons is no, Love is Not Blind. For some people who have extreme typecasting issues where like they have a problem where they're not able to like let people grow on them or accept different types of looks, which is just not something I relate to at all, then it might actually be useful for solving the adverse selection issue by forcing you to get to know somebody, develop feelings for them, and then you're not going to judge them in the same way on how they look. But for the normal person, it just seems like an unnecessary thing, which is almost impossible to carry the experiment out anyways.
Do you want to ask me for my takeaway from the show?
What's your takeaway from the show, babe?
If you can't find spaghetti, at least eat spaghetti.
Disgusting. Disgusting.
All right.
Um,
See you guys.
all right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.